Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar where we're talking about AI and auto-classification for structured data management and disposition. If you are new here and you do not know us, my name is Jen Nelson. I'm the VP Strategic Solutions at Valora Technologies, and joining me is my friend Sandy Serkis, who's the co-founder and CEO of Valora Technologies. So welcome today. We're so glad you could join us. We are here in our webinar series. So for 2025, we're just loading on the educational webinars. So today we're talking about structured data management. And if you've missed any of our previous webinars, I invite you to go to our website. You can view any of the ones we've done in the past on demand. And I also invite you to register for any upcoming webinars. We've added one new for next month, talking about IG and enterprise AI adoption. So that's something new we've just added recently. So again, invite you to check it out and register if you can. Before we get into our topic today, talking about structured data management and disposition, I'll just give you a little bit of a background about Valora if you are unfamiliar with us. We are celebrating 25 years in business this year, and we are an information governance platform. We leverage auto-classification technology, which is a kind of AI, to help automate the discovery, the identification, the auto-classification, and then the defensible disposition of content regardless of where it lives across the enterprise. And normally used by folks on the call today, information governance teams, information managers, legal teams, compliance teams, and to help bring all of these kind of siloed data structures into a single view to better help information management and information governance. And just as kind of as Valora has evolved over 25 years, so has the practice of information governance and records management. Because it really used to be that the IG team or the records team was really only focused on bringing together corporate records. So looking specifically at corporate records, when are things appropriate to be deleted and storing them in an appropriate way. But we know that it's really evolved into this more enterprise-wide data governance where, of course, records still play a pivotal role, but we're also looking at every piece of content that's created through a separate lens and through separate use cases. So accounting for documents that may be on legal hold or data privacy obligations maybe in your industry or in your business, and looking at incoming data from M&A and acquisitions and regulatory compliance and all that jazz. So this is ultimately what Valora brings to the table, is not only a single pane of glass to view all our different repositories, but a single solution to be able to solve for these multiple use cases through our enterprise-wide data governance practice. So that's a little bit about us. A little bit about you on the call today. We asked you when you were registering kind of who you are and what kind of what your concerns are for this year in your practice. Many on the call today are records and information management professionals. Of course you are. But it was interesting to see a lot of different roles, many people playing multiple roles within their organization. And that's something we're seeing more and more of as well. No one's just kind of wearing one hat anymore. Again, as kind of these use cases kind of meld into each other, we're kind of sharing the load, I'll say. So that's kind of who's around the table today. So welcome. And the challenges, when we asked you kind of what are your main challenges and what are you facing in your organization, rot and file reduction was a biggie. So was automating manual processes. And as always, OMG, you guys, everything. So, and that kind of speaks to, again, kind of those multiple use cases through a single practice. So before we dive in, we're just about there, a little bit of housekeeping. So Sandy and I will both be presenting and we'll be watching the chat and the Q&A. So I encourage you to put your questions in the Q&A box or the chat box, whatever, we'll get to it. We will be sending out a recording of this after the fact. So if you want to go back and watch anything or review anything, we'll be sending that out, as well as a copy of the slides. And of course, we welcome any feedback either in the chat or over email after the fact. Your feedback helps us shape the topics that we talk about during our webinar series. So we would love that. Okay, let's get into the good stuff. Okay, what are we talking about today? We're talking about AI and auto classification, specifically today in structured data management systems and the disposition of structured data sitting in those kind of siloed repositories. So what we're going to be reviewing are the responsibility and challenges of managing that data kind of stored in those siloed databases. What is AI? Because sometimes it's a little, I want to say it's a little fuzzy, and things are happening at such a rapid pace that, what even is it? And auto classification being a type of artificial intelligence, what are their roles in data analysis, and what can you do and what can you expect? We'll be talking about transforming structured data into user-friendly ways to look at our data called mockuments, so that'll be fun. And we'll also talk about how AI and auto classification can help teams like yours improve efficiency and compliance. And we'll also take you through a use case of one of our customers who have specifically mined and used their structured data in really cool ways. So we will discuss that as well. Now, recently, industry event-wise, if you were at the InfoNext 2025 event in Savannah a few weeks ago, this is a session that Sandy gave during the general session, which was kind of standing room only. So if you have seen it at that event, welcome back. And if not, then you're certainly in for a pretty cool 45 minutes. So welcome. It's great to see everybody online. So Sandy, why don't I hand that over to you?
Okay, so first of all, in case anyone is not sure, what is the difference between structured data and unstructured and semi-structured? So structured data generally means information that is kept in a database or kept in a structured format. So something like a spreadsheet or a database or a kind of like a working system, like a workday or something like that. Those are considered structured data systems. Semi-structured generally refers to something like email, which has a structured component, which is the email header to Sandy, from, Jen, date, and an unstructured portion, which is the body of the email. So that's what semi-structured is. And when we were doing the research for this webinar and for our presentation at InfoNext, I was shocked to discover that structured databases and the management of structured data is the single largest share of enterprise IT spending, which means that is where all the money is around these systems. One, because they're older in many cases, and two, because they're structured, they're an incredibly efficient method of storing data. So they're voluminous. You can think of, it's your customer database, it's your patient database, it's your employee database. Those are things that have a ton of information in a relatively compact environment. So when you stop and kind of unravel what must be behind that spending, it starts to make sense. Okay, Jen.
Sorry, I'm not sure why it's not. There we go. Sorry about that.
No worries. I'm just going to move my notes over to here. One of the kind of issues with structured data systems is the kind of the lack of context around them. They really are just data stores. They don't kind of help people navigate them very easily. In many cases, people in information governance or legal may not even have a formal account or any way to access the information in these systems. So it makes a governance challenge, and it is similarly a challenge when there's some sort of reason that you need to query these systems. There's an e-discovery request. There's a DSAR, or a knowledge management request. Whatever it is that might require the need to go through that, suddenly everybody's like, oh, I don't know how to go through that. Or even if I got in, I don't know how to navigate it. Like, that is not the best time to be figuring out how to navigate and how to use the data in these systems. In an ideal world, you'd have that down ahead of schedule. So, Jen, you can go on ahead. So yeah, this brings us to this concept of classification. So again, if you're somehow unfamiliar, classification is simply adding information to data. So you will hear that described as metadata, about the data. You might hear it described as tags or labels. But basically, classification is adding information that lets you know, without necessarily reading every file or reading every structured record, what's in there, like a little glossary. And auto classification is simply an automated technique to produce that classification data. We're going to get into that in more detail in just a minute, but just so you understand kind of the terminology here. So essentially what auto classification brings to the table for structured data is an ability to kind of rapidly, thoroughly analyze the content that is stored in a structured system, just like we would in an unstructured system, bring that to this structured universe and bring that information back out. So if you're looking for that single pane of glass that Jen was describing, there's going to be great benefit to having your structured data be part of the single pane. Too often when people talk about a single pane of glass, they're really only talking about bringing together a few unstructured systems. The best case would be bringing together all systems, structured, unstructured, semi-structured, everything together in one view. Okay, Jen? Do you want to take this one?
Yeah, sure. So what even is AI, right? So the definition of AI, of course, we hear it in the news, but artificial intelligence is really referring to anything that is the simulation of human intelligence. So software, machines, reasoning, things like that. But it's not new. So it's been around since the 50s. And if you've ever played, chess by yourself on a Windows machine back in the 90s, you have interacted with AI already. So it is not new, but the advancement, and recently the most rapid advancement we see is in the neural network. So which allows us to interact with the ChatGPTs and Geminis of the world to do more of an interactive search and retrieval. And so that's really kind of what we're talking about now, but there are different kinds of AI. So the first is machine learning, and those are algorithms that help computers and systems to learn from and make decisions and predictions about a subset or a set of data. So it's machine learning as it goes. The second kind is extractive AI. And that's often powered by natural language processing, and that's designed to extract specific information from data sets or texts. And it really focuses on kind of pulling out what the user is looking for. Now, generative AI, this is when when you're interacting with ChatGPT and the other generative AI engines, it is creating brand new content based on the data that it has trained on. So when we ask ChatGPT questions, it's going out into the internet and scanning websites and databases and in order to create and generate new content. If you were to apply this to your business and use your corporate or enterprise data for that, it would do the same thing. It would go into your data sets and it would use that to train itself on and to gather information and produce new content based on the questions or the interactions you're having with it. And the newest one, or the most recent one, is agentic AI. And Sandy, I'm going to let you explain agentic AI.
Sure. So you'll notice the word agent tucked in there, and that's because agentic AI basically goes beyond simply responding to prompts or executing a predefined task or even creating its own content. What agentic AI does is it actually performs actions on its own. It serves as its own agent. That's why it's named that. So it will interact with you. Let's say it's like a chat bot on a website. It's chatting with you. You're looking at a cruise ship and you're thinking, maybe I'll take a cruise, and it will say, shall I go ahead and book tickets for you? That is an agentic AI because it's going to take action on its behalf or yours or both. So agentic AI has a couple of distinct capabilities. It has perception, meaning it can gather data from the environment. It has reasoning, and that's a little bit of that rule stuff, processing information to attempt to understand the situation. It has this ability to take actions, making decisions and taking actions, and it learns, it adapts, and it improves based on your feedback and on back-end kind of rating systems. Was that the right thing to do? Yes, no. So that's agentic AI. It's the newest thing. You have probably seen it if you've ever seen ChatGPT or Claude say something like, you're having a discussion with it and it's sort of suggesting the next thing. Would you like me to make a chart of that? Would you like me to make a table of contents of that? That's the agentic AI in the background.
Cool. And we'll just spend a few minutes talking about kind of Gen AI reality versus fantasy, because it does seem magical to us, but it's really not. It is algorithms, or software algorithms, doing what it is being asked to do. But the first thing is it is trained on data sets. It is not making up, I shouldn't say that. I was about to say it's not making up stuff. Hold the phone for that. It's trained on data sets. So it is going to learn the data in order to generate new content. When you ask it questions, of course, it's pulling from the data sources, but it's creating new content there. So it is trained on data sets. It is not a magical search engine. So when you are searching through ChatGPT, and it will tell you, just make sure you double check this because I just made it up, So it is not a magical search engine, and it is creating new content based on learned patterns in the data, which does allow it to hallucinate. That's the third box there. So it wants to tell you what you're asking it. And so it'll either take a best guess based on the training data, but it doesn't fact check it. And it wants to tell you what you want to hear. And that can be very problematic. When you're thinking about, referencing an engine for support in a legal case, it will just kind of make things up, or maybe a compliance case. And the fourth one is that it's not up to date. It is only accurate as its last run of source data. So as an example, the day the ladies flew into space, I had asked it, because I was talking about it with somebody else, trying to give an example of this. And that afternoon I had said, has Katy Perry ever been to space? And it was like, no. But I asked it the next day, has Katy Perry ever been to space? Oh, well, yes. Da, da, da. So that's just an example of it's not, it only knows what it knows at that time and what it's run its training data on. So important to keep in mind. But also, so auto-classification, which is really mainly what Valora does and what we've been doing for a number of years, it is a type of artificial intelligence. But what it is, it really focuses on the machine learning aspect of it. And those are the machine learning algorithms that go through, and the extractive AI. So we're going through and combing through millions of files to be able to pull out good information. And the reason that is important, especially in what we do in the information governance world, is because it's defensible and it is traceable and auditable. When generative AI engines are creating new content based on their trained data sets, we were at a conference, and I'll never forget this. It was just the greatest explanation of how generative AI works. It was like everything happens in a black box, so you can't see it, but you can describe how it got to that conclusion, but you can't explain it. So that's where generative AI really differs from machine learning and extractive AI, where you can say, it called this thing this because, and you can trace it back. Or we've decided to change Form A to Form B. Oh, okay. I'll change all the Form A's to Form B's. And everything is traceable and auditable, which makes it very important, of course, when we're sitting in IG and IM seats. So what is auto-classification for folks who may not actually know the auto part of the auto-classification? It is machine algorithms combining rich metadata and rules to create and auto-classify. So it is not humans. We're not relying on humans to sort and say, put all your stuff that are the record over here. The software will go out and find everything and auto-classify. So it's going to answer the question, what is this thing and what do I do with it? And then it can perform the disposition and actually do it. So the first step it does is look for file and rich metadata. So that little box down here is usually the system generated metadata, file type, created date, last modified by, whatever. It doesn't tell us anything about the contents of the file. What we want to get to is the meat and the information contained in the document. So last modified date tells me nothing. If it's a contract, what's the termination date? What's the effective date? What's the renewal date? So we're going to be looking for rich metadata within the documents. And when we find those nuggets, we can determine, oh, this is a service agreement, or this is a termination letter, or these are board minutes, based on the content that the software finds in each file that it opens. And then it will perform and apply disposition algorithms. So it will determine, based on what I've just read, this is an employment contract. So if it's an employment contract, mark it as confidential, move it to the appropriate area in HR SharePoint, retain it for 8 years after the termination of the employee. This is a new employment contract. So that event hasn't even happened yet. It's not even contemplated to have happened yet, but we're going to have to watch for it. And then let's get HR's approval before we delete it. So that's an example of kind of multiple disposition algorithms that can be applied to a single document. And we can do that in an automated, manual, or a hybrid fashion, depending on kind of where it lives. But it doesn't have just to be like tag it and move it or delete it. It could be, report on it, or put all these things on legal hold, or, move them to the appropriate archive, or there's sensitive data in here. Like, let's anonymize the data that is sensitive, as an example. So there's a lot of things that you can do on the disposition of that kind of content. And in auto-classifying a document, so now we're talking about unstructured data. This should look very familiar to you if you're in your Windows file share and you come across LGPIF final. Oh, okay, like what the heck is that, right? So an example of how that auto-classifying works is it is going to open up this unstructured data, and it is going to start pulling data facets out, that rich metadata. So doc type is informed consent form. It's a pharmaceutical company. What's the drug name? What's the trial? Who is the doctor? Who are the patients? Who are the people in the trial or the participants? What date did this happen on, and how long do we have to keep this? And by pulling out those different facets, it will determine, based on the record retention schedules and policies, oh, it's a consent form. Well, it's part of the record class of clinical trials. We need to keep it for 8 years. And then, what do we do with it after the fact? And who, alert us when December 14th, 2031 comes around, as an example. So that's how it looks at unstructured data. Now, when it looks for auto-classifying structured data, because quite often when you output structured data, you get something that looks like this, a CSV with like 100,000 line items. And, oh, sure, I'm just going to do a text search for client ABC, where there's 130,000 results come back. So when we auto-classify structured data, each row in the structured data becomes its own data subject or topic with its own metadata. So think of maybe this is an employee database, or maybe it's a customer database, or whatever information you're housing in that structured data. And the interesting thing about it, and what we kind of came across, is that when you are incorporating structured data into your data set, when you're kind of pulling all that up into a 30,000 foot view, how do you actually visualize it, and how can a human interact with this amount of data in a way that is easy for your human brain to see it and analyze it and process it? So how do you process and account for that structured data? And Sandy, can I hand it over to you?
Yes, of course. And one thing that I'll mention also that can be very tricky with structured data, when Jen was showing you that sort of that wall of numbers and, kind of spreadsheet appearance, part of the issue that we hear is that not every line in here hits its retention window at the same time. Imagine if this was a list of employee data and your retention schedule says you'll keep things for 8 years past the termination of the employee. Well, every employee on here terminates at a different time. So how do you kind of defensively delete one line versus another line versus another line, especially if you don't necessarily even have access into that system, let alone what's present there? So that is just another layer of challenge, because you don't have this notion of a document or a record. And you'll hear me say this. I'm going to talk about lowercase r record and capital R record. So when we look at a database, that line, that orange line that Jen has highlighted there, that's a lowercase r record, because that is the word that databases use to mean one line of info. So that is, but that's not a record in our information governance context. That's a capital R record, but it may be. Or, again, if this is a list of patients and it's not particularly sorted in any way, and Jen Nelson, our patient involved in trials, is represented 16 times in this data, but if I'm looking at it this way, she's line 10, she's line 40,000, she's line 600 million. Like, how do I even gather those together when, if, let's say, I have a DSAR regarding Jen and I need Jen and only Jen's data to come out of that structured database? How do I pinpoint this line, this lower R record, this one, and somehow bring those together without everybody else, which she is not entitled to see or know about? So those are the big challenges working with structured data. That brings us, go ahead, that brings us to mockuments. So mockument, yes, it's a word we made up at Valora. We're very proud of this word because it's incredibly descriptive. And it is essentially, it's a document, note the air quotes, that we cause to come into existence that does exactly what I just described. I need everything related to Jennifer Nelson, the patient ID 1234, and it pulls all that line item information regarding her into a new document that did not exist before, did not exist certainly in the structured environment or anywhere else, and it is a mockument. It's a visual that lays out everything I need to know about Jen, and nothing and nobody else, only the specific kind of pinpointed, there's that extractive AI at play, pulled together in a new format, the mockument. Okay, Jen? So this is kind of how it works. So your data lives in databases, or perhaps you have started utilizing a data lake. If people are unfamiliar, what's a data lake? A data lake is kind of what it sounds like. It's a dumping ground for data that's been imported from other systems. It might have come from databases, it might have come from structured, unstructured systems, and it's just kind of plopped into a kind of blob storage format, and it's called a data lake. There can be more sophisticated management of data lakes, but honestly, in our experience, we have not seen that to be true. It's just a way, usually, for an organization to have at least all their data in one place, so that when there are querying engines like Valora's or like an AI training algorithm, it has a single place to go. So instead of having to go to 15 different locations, you can go to the data lake, understanding that this part of the data lake looks like that, and this part looks like this, and they have nothing to do with each other, but at least they're in the same spot-ish. That's what a data lake is. So when we connect to a database or a data lake and we crawl that, what we get is an export of the data, just like Jen was showing you before. It kind of looks and feels a little bit usually like a spreadsheet or a CSV or a JSON file. And there is that line item, that lowercase r record, that pertains to some basis of the line item. It might be an employee, it might be a product name, it might be a division, whatever it is, however you've organized your database, and or however you're asking it to report to you. So if you're familiar with the concept of pivot tables in Excel, you can ask it to produce things with a different kind of frame of reference. Give me the employee ID frame of reference versus the country frame of reference, just for example. So you get that export in some sort of structure like that. And then what our system does is go through and create the mockument related to the single purpose that you're after. In this case, and it's very small on my screen, if we're looking for the information about a single employee or a single customer or whatever, producing it in this kind of human-friendly format, kind of amalgamating all the bits and pieces from all the different line items and putting it together in a nice, easy to digest format that contains all the data we're looking for. Even though Sally Patient there, even though her, let's say her account number might show up in 16 different systems, we only need it represented once. What is her account number? It's this. And then if you care, what is the source of that, right? Just like AI, where did you get that from? Did you hallucinate that? Again, in a system like ours, which is based on machine learning and extractive AI, it is going to be able to provide you that provenance. Where did that come from? Can you validate the authenticity and the path, the way in which you gathered that data? So that, not shown on this screen, but certainly available to provide the validity of the data behind the mockument. Okay. Whoops, I just froze. There we go. Okay. So now we get to some real world applications. Whoa, mockuments sound cool. What will they allow us to do? So basically what we're doing is making this structured data visible and easy to digest in what we would kind of call like a dossier format. Give me everything you know about so-and-so, or give me everything you know about X topic. It's like a digest of all the useful data points kind of brought together into a single, essentially a report for our use cases. And there are lots of different ones. You might want, for legal and compliance, find me everything that I need to redact. I need to produce something and I need to anonymize all this information. I need to redact it all. Maybe it's, there's an M&A and we're acquiring all this data. I need to kind of organize it together. Give me everything you know about X. And then there's, the big promise of AI here, of course, is, help me with our decision making, our forecasting, our purchasing patterns and whatnot. Again, a mockument is a stepping stone to all of these kind of business use cases. One extra sort of benefit, and if I'm perfectly honest, how we kind of fell into mockuments in the very beginning a number of years ago, which is that mockuments can kind of serve as a placeholder. So what do I mean by a placeholder? Let's say your organization produces a monthly sales report at the end of every month. And here's January, February, March. Where the heck is April? Nobody has it. Where's the file? No one knows it's gone. May, June, where's April? So what we will do is make a mockument, a placeholder that says, April appears to be missing. No one can account for April, but we're going to put this mockument in its place and indicate that that is the state of events, so that the next year, when you're looking for April 2024, you don't have to repeat that. Where's April? Do you have April? I don't know what happened. You have this mockument kind of holding court in place of what should have been an actual document. So that was our initial use case for mockuments. And then we realized how valuable that would be once you had the mockument kind of holding its own as a kind of format, as a place to store valuable information. We could use it in all kinds of ways. So, for example, if you didn't have April, maybe April, instead of just a placeholder that says, sorry, no info, but here's a summary of January to now, or here's last April, or here's a forecast on what April might have looked like given March and May, right? You can get much more clever with the mockument, and that is how we came up with all these applications. And once we kind of started working with our customer base about the concept of a mockument and how you would use it and how it could serve to fill that gap from structured data and present it in this way, boy, they started coming up with a gazillion different applications. So I don't know, Jen, if you want to speak to this one, or you want me to just keep going, or?
Yeah, sure, whatever you like.
Okay, so what the mockument ultimately does, it's like a tiny little microcosm of our system Black Hat, which is that single pane of glass UI. The mockument is its own version of a single pane of glass, but on a specific topic. So, give me a single pane of glass on Jen Nelson, patient, or give me a mockument on all activity, in the sales department across this topic. So that is kind of how mockuments served as this unified view. Let's go ahead on to the other one, then the next one. Okay, so the other thing that, of course, you get with mockuments is a huge efficiency gain, because particularly regarding structured data, which can be an absolute bear to just navigate, you can have mockuments built either in advance, give me a mockument for every employee that came over with blah, blah acquisition, or you can have them run on the fly. We've had a DSAR request from Jen Nelson, former employee. Go, produce the mockument on the fly, everything related to her. And if you're clever, and we are, you can have that DSAR request that Jen or somebody in legal kind of fills out the form to validate her in the first place, automatically synced up to the classification. So it goes, she enters her request, I'm Jen Nelson, I'm employee ID, blah, blah, blah. I want to know everything you have on me, go. Hooks into Powerhouse. Powerhouse interprets that, runs the search on the structured systems, pulls back the mockument, sends it back up for review. That can all happen in about a minute and a half, just to give you a feel for something that would normally take probably 3-4 weeks, normally. The other thing that we get with this is, because the software is doing this work like other kind of automation arguments, it improves the accuracy and reduces the errors, because it's going to go get everything related to Jen. It's not going to skip over something. It's not going to get distracted. And it's just going to, and you can test that, because you run tests before you put things into, production, before deployment. You run and make sure. So once it's performing once the first time, it is going to continue to perform appropriately. Okay. So that takes us directly to kind of the whole AI argument. And again, the AI is great, and the promise is so strong. It's going to make all our lives so much easier. It's going to do all this stuff so quickly. And now with agentic, it's going to do it instead of us doing it. And that's all great, but you have to put the guardrails in place for AI. You have to tell it, don't do this crazy cuckoo thing, and don't invent things. And you have to prove to everyone, or anyone who would ask, how you got this information and why you made the decisions that you did. So when we're using AI in data governance, we have to do the same thing. We have to put guardrails in place. And I'm here to tell you that one of the easiest ways to do that is to draw the line between generative AI and machine learning AI. Machine learning AI is always going to be documentable and auditable. Gen AI, I won't say always, but at present is not. So you want to have different techniques for managing the utilization of those different kinds of approaches. And one of the big mistakes that organizations make is they'll come up with an AI governance policy, and they'll just sort of broadly apply it to all things AI. And that's a huge mistake, because the types of AI are very different. They need to be managed and overseen differently. You're not going to get good information if you attempt to audit generative AI the way you would audit machine learning. You're going to get a lot of information from machine learning. You're going to get nothing from generative AI, and your audit is going to be essentially empty. So you want to kind of, as you're putting together an AI governance framework, you want to make sure that you account for the different types, and that it becomes part of your broader information governance kind of policies and strategies. Okay, so let's go right to our case study, to mockuments in action. I don't think any of them are on the call today, but this is from our work with Oracle, a long-standing client of Valora's. We're very excited to be beginning year 6 with them. And Oracle is a huge organization. They've grown primarily by acquisition. They've been acquiring companies for more than 25 years at this point, and they have, if you count former employees and current employees, millions of employee records. So what the kind of challenge for them originally was, oh my God, we have all this unstructured data. We got that all organized and sorted out. And then, wait a minute, what about all the structured data? And specifically for Oracle, a year or two ago, they acquired Cerner, which was another, I think 60,000 employees. It's a huge acquisition, one of the biggest acquisitions of the year. And what they inherited was not just unstructured data, but a whole pile of Workday data, which was not going to fly at Oracle because Workday is a competitor to Oracle. And so we needed another solution here. And a way to get all the information out of Workday, what needs to be retained, what's no longer important, which is for employees that have long since left the organization, way past retention. What about the ones that left just a year ago, but so we still need to maintain their data, but not, even though the employee isn't here. So this is what all of the challenge was. Furthermore, very few people at Oracle had any access into this Workday system. So how can we pull information on Jen Nelson, employee? You've got from patient to customer to employee to former employee. You get around, Jen. How do I get everything related to Jen because she's part of this class action and we need to produce all of her data when it's sitting in Workday? Well, answer, and it's in Workday, it's in PeopleSoft, it's in HCM, it's in 100 different places. Answer, mockuments. Put the mockument together that will query all the different locations, pull together the dossier on Jen, and make a mockument for each employee so that these are always available. Anytime there's a legal matter, Jen shows up in this legal matter and that legal matter, and she's part of this class action. And so we always have this information at the ready on her. One thing that starts to happen over time is that the mockument itself becomes a record, effectively. It didn't exist as it was kept in the course of business initially, but it is kept now. So in many cases, what is getting produced to the other side, whether it's a DSAR request or it's a litigation, discovery request, is the mockument rather than the starting document. Because first of all, in the case of structured data, there really isn't a notion of a starting document. You could print out or produce out that 200,000 line Excel, but you would have to redact everybody but Jen. I hope you have a lot of magic marker because she's 6 lines of this 200,000 line document. And that is what most of the organizations that we talk to are doing, whether they're doing it with a pen or they're doing it, with click and drag on the screen, is they're redacting out everything but the handful of lines that are germane. And then they have to go find it also because she's at the beginning of the document and on page 704, there's one line related to her because that was when she terminated and it's kept in, date, activity, order, what have you. So having the mockument is not just for your own use, it serves as a producible, kind of valid, verifiable production that satisfies the letter of the law without having to take on all of this effort to produce kind of what you had with everything else chopped out of it. So once we got a really good question when we were at InfoNext, when somebody heard me get to that point and said, okay, Sandy, we're with you. We get it. Mockument's great. And you said the mockument becomes a record. Well, you just added to my record classes. Now I have a new record class for mockument. How do we manage that? And isn't this self-referential? And the answer is yes. The mockument is a new type of record. We did create a record class in the Oracle record retention schedule for mockuments and how they are treated. So first of all, because this is related to employees, the mockuments refresh themselves about every 30 days, in some cases 90 days, depending on the cadence frequency that we revisit all of these systems. So, and they can also happen on the fly. So Jen's mockument will update with the fact that she got a raise there. So you're also a good employee, Jen. She got a raise, last month. That's got to be reflected in her salary level or in whatever it is we're tracking into the mockument. So the mockuments refresh. And so there's some question, do you keep the old mockument? Do you flush the old mockument? In Oracle's case, they are flushing them and always using the most recent mockument, and the fact that prior versions existed is documented, but they're not kept. And then what they're doing is tying the mockument to the record class for the employee. So in this case, Jen's mockument ties to her in terms of retention. So if she's still an active employee, then the mockument stays active. If she is a terminated employee, then the 8-year goes into effect and the mockument goes with it. And that's because these mockuments are all tied to employment and to employees. In other organizations, the mockument may be tied to a product life cycle or the document type. We might say, however it is you would normally manage an internal report. We would consider mockument in the same category. This is where the flexibility and the kind of setup and configuration working with clients comes into play. The mockument can be adapted, and the record retention of that can be adapted to the client's circumstance. So that takes us to challenges and considerations, and this is both about mockuments, about classification, about AI in general. Just with mockuments, I'll start there and then we'll get larger. Just so people know, mockuments will add a small little bit to your document count. If you're going to be making mockuments for every X, whether that's employee, customer, whatever it is, then yes, you're going to be increasing your document volume a little bit. You can put them on retention. They can be on a much smaller retention if you feel that's appropriate. So there are some considerations about storage and about, processing power and things like that. Moving up one layer to kind of classification and AI in general, the mockuments are quite easily classifiable because they were created by the system. So they're born with their classification. How lovely, just what we think all documents should be. And then moving up one layer into AI. So Jen, this is where I will turn it back over to you.
Yes. So thank you. If you only one slide to look at for today would be kind of the key takeaways, and things that we chatted about today was addressing those challenges in managing structured data and how to combine those different siloed data, structured, unstructured, semi-structured, into a single pane of glass view or into a single place where humans and teams can now manage and make decisions and work with data. And of course, having that view and having the ability to be able to pull all of that different disparate data up into one view to manage obviously improves the efficiency and transparency of your data. No stone is left unturned. No piece of data is left unknown. Everything is accounted for and classified. And the ability to turn that structured data into a format like a mockument is, with the clients that we have had anyways, have just proved monumental in the way that you can now interact with structured data and avoid the 1 million row spreadsheet. And of course, any kind of AI, whether it's auto-classification or other extractive AI technologies, or even generative AI as well, although it's not traceable or auditable, it can drive and help to drive scalability and, of course, accuracy and better decision-making. We can use all of the really great data that we have in our stores to our advantage. And let's start understanding what's in our data stores so that we can make that happen and that we can account for and use that data wisely. And certainly, and I'll asterisk this when when putting your own data into a generative AI engine, or getting those data sets to start to train those LLMs and Gen AI models, to make sure that it's the right data, that it's looking at accurate data, it's not looking at outdated data, so that when you are interacting with it and the Gen AI LLMs are learning on it, it's learning with the most appropriate data. So with that, I thank you very much. I am going to try to see if there's any questions, but I don't know if you guys can see that.
I don't see any yet, but we invite you guys at this point, go ahead and ask any of your questions.
Great. Yeah, Sandy, I can't see that at all. So so maybe you can just tell me.
I think I'm in the Q&A here.
Yeah, I can't see it. I think it's because I'm sharing my screen.
Yeah, I don't see anything that's come in, so.
Okay, great. Well, if there is no questions to come in to fill this dead space, then I would invite you to go to valoratech.com. That is the address for our website. Again, by tomorrow, this presentation will be up online on our website, but you will also receive an email with the recording and the copy of the slides as well. If this interests you and you'd like to have a bit of a brainstorming session with us, I invite you to either shoot me an email, my address is there, or go online and book a demo at a time that works for you. And we can kind of talk about your use case and situation. You can have a look at the tool if you'd like. We can talk a little bit more about incorporating that structured data into the unstructured systems to be able to see it in one spot. And again, any questions that you have, please don't hesitate to reach out to either Sandy or I, and we will get those answered for you. Awesome. Okay, well, if that's it for questions, again, please, after the fact, feel free to reach out to us. But thank you, everyone, for joining today. It's always great to see everybody. And yeah, until next time, thanks very much.